If you're a girl and you straighten, curl, or apply heat in any way to your hair, then this video is for you, because today we're testing cheap versus expensive heat protectant sprays. We started with testing out our cheap option. And you can tell by the color difference it did help regulate the heat distribution a little bit. Now we're testing the expensive option. This also did a great job of regulating the heat being applied. And you can see the differences here. The left side has no protectant, the middle is the cheap, and the far right is the expensive.
And expensive wins! Cheap versus expensive, hand wipes.
For our cheap option, we have the Purell sanitizing wipes. We wrote on his hand with a permanent marker and then tested how long it would take for the wipe to completely clean his hand. And I would say it took a little bit over a full minute. Now for our expensive option. And after about a minute, here were the results. You could still faintly see it. Now for the same test, but we painted his entire palm. The paint was drying pretty fast, so at first it was a little difficult. But it was coming off eventually. We did need 2 wipes though. The expensive wipes did seem to have a slightly tougher time, but I would say that the performances of both were pretty close.
And cheap wins! Cheap versus expensive, whisk.
So we grabbed an egg to test how long it would take each whisk to fully mix together the yolk and the egg whites. Cheap whisk does require more forearm effort, which means you could get tired a little quicker, and it requires a larger range of motion to get the mixture mixed. The cheap whisk took about 45 seconds. Now for the expensive whisk. You can see that this whisk is more effective and it has a shorter range of motion. And you definitely won't get tired as easy. He can do this all day. And this whisk only took about 25 seconds.
And expensive wins! Cheap versus expensive, cut resisting gloves.
So our expensive gloves are going to cost you around $20, while our cheap gloves are going to cost you $8. We started with just a light slice test on our palm to see if the gloves really held up. And they seemed to be just fine. Now we're doing a grip test. The cheap gloves were barely able to hold on to the pomegranate, while the expensive seemed to grip a little better. Now for a slightly more aggressive test. We were slicing the palms pretty hard to see if it'll make any cuts. And we also used a pair of scissors to see if it could cut through the fabric. And it was definitely able to do that. And here's the end result of the gloves after all the cuts and slices. Although all the damage, the palm seemed to hold up pretty well. Now for the expensive. Honestly, it was pretty easy to tell that the expensive was going to hold up a lot better. It's made out of stainless steel mesh, which resembles chainmail armor. And again, it didn't seem to have any damage on the palms. Now to see how it holds up against scissors. It was able to barely cut through the glove, but it couldn't get all the way through. And here's the end result. It did have some noticeable damage, but the fact that it comes with a second layer underneath makes it a lot more protected.
And expensive wins! Cheap versus expensive, hand towels.
Both towels are made out of cotton, but our cheap option is made out of 100% ring spun cotton, while our expensive is made out of bamboo cotton. Both towels felt pretty soft, but our expensive option felt thicker and slightly softer. And you can tell from the absorption test which towel had a much easier time absorbing all the liquid. Then we did a microscope test to see the fibers up close. And the fibers of the expensive towel just felt closer together and thicker. So overall, if you want a good set of towels that are going to last you a long time and be soft and thick, I would go with the expensive option.
And expensive wins! Cheap versus expensive, herbal teas.
So our cheap teas costed around $15, while our expensive costed $30. The cheap comes with 32 tea bags, while the expensive only comes with 10. But the expensive does provide the more effective pyramid tea bag infusers. This test is to see which tea bag steeps into the water more quickly. And instantly, judging by the color difference, the expensive is doing a better job. It's said to let the tea steep for 5 minutes to be able to extract the full flavor. And you can tell the expensive is doing just that because it's sunk to the bottom. Now for the taste test. So I wouldn't say that the cheap tea tasted bad, but if we're going to compare the two, the expensive definitely had a better taste.
Expensive wins!